Hi, everyone. I'm Eugene Hernandez from Film at Lincoln Center, and I'm the director of the New York Film Festival and the deputy executive director of our programs at Film at Lincoln Center. Thrilled to have this opportunity to sit down with a crew of folks who have made, well, in my humble opinion, one of the more meaningful films and one of the stronger documentaries of this past year. It's called Welcome to Chechnya. If you're watching this conversation, it's very likely that you've already watched the film. If you're watching this conversation and you haven't watched the film yet, I would say pause this conversation, go watch the film, and then come back to watch or listen to this conversation. So welcome to our Film at Lincoln Center YouTube feed. Welcome to the Film at Lincoln Center podcast, for those of you who are listening on audio. I want to dive in and welcome our guests and thank them for spending some time with us today, where it's early February as we record this. Filmmaker David France, welcome.
Thank you.
No stranger to me or to Lincoln Center or to Film at Lincoln Center.
Thanks for having us, Eugene. It's great to see you.
Welcome back. I'm sorry we're not doing this. I'm sorry we're not doing this on a stage at Lincoln Center, which would have been our preferred venue. On the other hand, I'm glad that we're all able to join from wherever in the world we are to be together, because I think that's you can't always have everybody in person, so this is actually kind of cool too.
I think unfortunately we're probably under a mile from one another, and yet separated impenetrably by this pandemic.
I'm glad we're all together today. Allow me to introduce a few other folks, and then I'll ask some questions, and we'll just kind of hit a bunch of different topics. So welcome Alice Henty, a producer of Welcome to Chechnya. Hi there.
Hi, nice to be
here. How are you?
Thanks. Nice. I'm great. Thank you.
Nice to see you. Nice to talk to you. Igor Myakotin is a co-producer of the film. Welcome, Igor. How are you?
Well, hi. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. And Igor gets to wear two hats today, both as a co-producer of this film. We'll talk about that. Thank you for also being a translator for our guest, Maxim Lapunov. And for those of you who have now seen the film, you know who Maxim is. Welcome, Maxim.
Hi.
We saw your wave. Now we heard your greeting. So thank you. Well, look, thank you everybody again for doing this. As I mentioned, it's early February as we record this, and I mentioned that because as I was rewatching the film this week and preparing some questions for the conversation with all of you, I was thinking back to a year ago, or a little over a year ago, when I had the opportunity to see the film for the first time. I had certainly heard about it from David, and was anticipating the opportunity to see this film at Sundance at that first screening. I watched it with, I've seen it a couple times now, but I watched it this week with a bit of an exhale, because I just remembered being watching it for the first time a year ago, David, and sitting way up front in the theater at Sundance, and just being so anxious the whole time, and just holding my breath through so much of the film, not knowing where it was going to take me. And it certainly doesn't lessen the impact of the film to watch it a couple times later and a year later. But at the same time, it knowing sort of where we're going to go in the film helped at subsequent viewings. But I wanted to use that as a frame, David, to start by just asking you to maybe walk us through, kind of think back to a year ago and sort of where you were with the film and bringing it to the world for the first time, and now where we are a year later. I'd love to know how you sort of view that year. You could talk about impact that you feel the film has had, the conversation that it's instigated. Has it met your expectations? Has it exceeded them?
Well, I'm glad that you encouraged me to focus on the year for the film, because I don't really think I could tell you what the year's been like for me as a person, and I think we all have that that kind of ungraspable experience of the last year, being locked down and away from people. And we were traveling with the film. We were luckier than a lot of other films in this past year that we got to premiere it offline, as it were, in real theater. And And we carried it to a couple of festivals, and I was traveling with everybody who's here on this panel with me, until we were, ultimately sent home like everybody else. And we worried that the hopes and dreams that we had for the film had been dashed, as so much had been back in March. But really, the film festival circuit did an amazing job of reinventing itself as an online experience, and effectively recreating the connection between films and audiences that I thought was kind of impossibly a victim to all of this. And so we did find our audience in really amazing places, and often appearing live in Zoom conversations with the audiences afterwards, and in some places when they were able to bring audiences back into theaters to actually meet with audiences, although we haven't been able to travel, but except over the internet. And that's been really amazing, and I've been really impressed by how our industry and your industry, especially Eugene, has really reinvigorated this whole world of film rollouts. And so thank you for that. And we've also been doing work with our impact producers, and the film has been gaining the kind of traction that we were hoping for. And that's been great. I mean, we've been able to have screenings with lawmakers. Those screenings have been able to produce really tangible things like sanctions against the perpetrators of these crimes. The film has been useful, I think, to Maxim in his case, as he's pursuing it in the European courts. He might talk about that. And certainly has been effective for the activists who are depicted in the film, who were really desperate for some tool that might help them, reopen conversations with international partners that would be so necessary for them to continue their work. And they've been able to continue their work and raise money, thanks, I think, in part to the visibility that the film has given them, and continue even despite closed borders to get people to safety.
So thank you, David. Let me, as a way of building a foundation for this conversation we're having, let me ask kind of the same question to Maxim. But Maxim, you could take it obviously from your perspective. Your perspective on this film will certainly be different from David's in that it represents a part of your life and your struggle and the work you are doing. So maybe if you don't mind reflecting on the past year, and kind of the same question is a simple one. Is it in what ways is it what you expected? In what ways has it met or exceeded your expectations? As we talk about this film a year after first showing it and first, revealing yourself in the way that you did through this film to an audience.
Ну, первым делом хочу всех поздравить с годовщиной фильма. Это очень важное событие. За год изменилось на самом деле многое. Если 3 года назад мы начали судебный процесс, и целая команда работала над моим кейсом, было очень много сложных периодов, как эмоциональных, так и физически, да, болезнь сестры, ее уход, и много таких очень сложных этапов в жизни мы прошли, то как раз когда вышел фильм, в течение этого года мы побывали на многих кинофестивалях, увидели, как люди нас поддерживают, помогают. И это, конечно, дало свои результаты. То есть мы окрепли, настроение стало лучше, состояние в общем, здоровье, но пандемия, к сожалению, поломала все планы, которые у нас были по работе, по самореализации, но, тем не менее, мы стараемся дальше жить, и очень, в принципе, сейчас все хорошо в семье.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to congratulate everyone here on anniversary of the premiere of Welcome to Chechnya. That's a big achievement, I think. And it's been a difficult year. A lot has happened, and we're still working with my team on my case at the European Court of Human Rights. Unfortunately, my sister was ill and she passed away this year. But being at the premiere in person at film festivals, traveling around in the beginning of the year, was amazing. It was great meeting the people who saw the film, the actual audience, and they made us stronger. We feel we're stronger now and we're doing better health-wise, and feel better about the film being out. Also, the pandemic really hurt us in terms of work and jobs and just well-being, but we're still holding strong, and trying to move on.
Да, еще хотел добавить огромное спасибо всем людям, которые нас поддерживали все это время, потому что на самом деле был сложный этап, и как раз благодаря фильму еще судебный процесс намного ускорился. То есть если в марте должны были принять окончательное решение, то это решение было принято вот только в октябре 2020. То есть сроки сместились из-за пандемии, но тем не менее благодаря фильму мой кейс в ЕСПЧ не задержался надолго. Он продолжает работать, и мы надеемся на последние уже инстанции, то есть на последние шаги, да, какие-то.
And I also would like to thank everyone who supported us and supported the film along the way, especially in the beginning of last year. It was a very difficult period when the pandemic hit, the lockdown hit. We were very fortunate to receive the help from a lot of people. And also, even though my court case was delayed because of the pandemic, I still feel like the film helped to pressure my case to make it stronger, to make it more urgent at the European Court of Human Rights. And right now we're in the final stages of waiting for the verdict of what's actually going to be the end of it. We're at the finish line right now.
We'll come back to this question of, we'll come back in depth to this question of impact. And I think that's the impact of this film will be so intertwined with the legacy of this film, David. And we'll come back to that because it's an important, not just with a year's space to talk about it, but as we look ahead. But for those who might be watching or listening to this conversation, who might be new to this film, there might be people who were just seeing it now. So I know that in the year that you've been all traveling together to talk about this film, you've certainly talked about the origin story of it. So I apologize for asking you to rehash that for us, but I think it's an important foundation for us to understand. And maybe the way I'll ask you, David, is just how did this team come together? How did they give us some of the bullet points and the highlights of how this film not only came together specifically, but as you think about it now, sometime with a little bit of time, even though it's still so much a part of your life, how it builds on the work that you're doing and you've been doing as an artist. I think that's an important piece of context for folks who might be introduced to you in this moment right now.
The news first broke about what was happening, about this genocide in the south of Russia in early 2017, and I kind of backburnered the news and the knowledge about it. It wasn't until that summer that I read an article in the New Yorker about the work that activists were doing, kind of ordinary activists were having to do in Russia to try to save people, this kind of heroic work that was being carried out in the absence of any sort of real effective diplomatic or political pressure being brought to bear against the Kremlin for not stopping this. And that for me is what tied this into my other work, this idea that it was a story about kind of radical activism, about the lengths to which ordinary people who were drafted somehow by what they had seen and experienced into doing things that even they would have thought would be beyond their own kind of courage level, or certainly their own training level, their own ability to take on risk. And the risks that I learned were being shouldered by the people who are now in the film, shocked me. You know, it shocked me that that kind of thing was going on in today's world, and so that I reached out right away to begin to do that reporting. I was in Moscow. I was traveling with a book at the time, so I was in the UK for the Edinburgh Book Festival, and I traveled from there to Moscow just for a couple of days to see firsthand and to do a little scouting to see what I might be able to film there. And everything was happening at once, and I stayed for more than a month with hardly enough, change of clothing because I was not expecting this, and everything was happening, and I just kept filming at that time. And one of the first things that I did was I remembered meeting Igor, and I'd met him over that summer at the Provincetown Film Festival. He was beginning his career in filmmaking, and he had spoken to me after a screening about the work that he wanted to do, and about his life as a Russian exile in the US. He was living in Provincetown at the time, and I thought, I've got to find that Igor from the streets of Provincetown. And I reached out to him and said, "You've got to come to work with me. We've got to do this thing." And so he was really the first recruit, and not a real eager recruit. I don't know if you've ever tried to get somebody to move away from Provincetown, Eugene. It's like it's a fool's mission. It was very hard to do to get him to come to New York to work on this, but he was really key. And he came to New York even before I got back from Russia, and had begun working at the studio and begun investigating some of our security issues and taking meetings with people. He really launched our security work that resulted in all of the many protocols that we ultimately brought in. And then and Alice was the next recruit, somebody to come in and run the team who had such incredible experience and making like world-class documentaries, but also she had the courage to take on this world that she knew nothing about, and to lift up a film that required this kind of security, vigilance. And I spoke to others before and after meeting her who didn't want to do it and didn't feel up to the task, and she did, and she was really, I think, called to it as a kind of a mission, a kind of a filmmaker's mission to join the team and to chart our course and to lead us through this.
It's a great transition then, thank you, David, to ask Igor and to ask Alice, why did you answer that call? Why did you, despite convenience or other motivations, certainly that can be understandable sometimes, something in each of you led you to ultimately answer the call that David made, and so much time later we're sitting here talking about it. So Igor, if you don't mind starting, and then Alice, if you don't mind, just elaborate kind of the same question for David. Why this film, why now, and how it connects to the work that you do or want to do?
Of course. Well, first of all, because it's David's friends. Who wouldn't want to work with David's friends? I saw How to Survive a Plague when I met him the first time in Provincetown. And so that film had a big impact on me and on a lot of people. And so I think it was just, pure curiosity and admiration for a filmmaker that's very smart and evocative, and can, you really can trust him when he says he's going to take on this subject to explore. And the second is because I'm from Russia, I'm gay myself, so it was very personal to me that I get to work on this. It wasn't easy to move out of Provincetown, but I think ultimately, these reasons sort of outweighed me staying here in Provincetown. So I think, it was just a chance that I couldn't miss.
Same question to Alice. That call, tell me about that call.
Yeah, so I was Yeah, I'd actually spoken to David. I share Igor's admiration of David as filmmaker. How to Survive a Plague is one, is up there as one of my favorite documentaries ever. And I had spoken to David a few years before about the possibility of working on Marsha, The Life and Death of Marsha P. Johnson, also an amazing film. But I think my schedules didn't align and it didn't work out. But hadn't really had much interaction with David since then. Got this call, it was right after just kind of wrapping up on the work. And he told me that he had access to the safe houses in Russia as the Chechen men and women were coming through them. And I just could not believe that he had that access. It's a story that I had followed, mainly piqued by Masha Gessen's article in the New Yorker. So I was aware of it falling off the headlines, and I wasn't, I guess in my mind, I thought it wasn't still happening because it wasn't in the news anymore. But when David called me and told me that he had access to this, I remember saying, let me think about it. I'll call you back tomorrow. Because it was such a huge undertaking, right? It's scary. And then I thought about it for 12 hours, and I was like, I can't not do it. I have to do this film. This is so important, and he's so there. He's so present in it. It was just like a once in a lifetime opportunity, really. So I did it, and I'm so glad I did.
Maxim, I wonder about your thought process. You talked a moment ago about where you are with the court case, and we can talk more about that and hear more about sort of where that might go. But also, how did you think about what was your decision-making process as you thought about how and whether to participate in this film? Help us understand how you made the decision to reveal yourself in the film in the way you do, and to collaborate with this team.
Я извиняюсь, у мамы стрижка, и там очень громко работает фен. У нее через 2 дня юбилей, она готовится усиленно. Итак, ладно. Как все началось? На самом деле я решил твердо для себя, что я подаю заявление в Следственный комитет. Я не знал, чего от этого ожидать и как все это будет происходить. Но я это уже решение принял. Мне уже помогали юристы, российская ЛГБТ-сеть включилась как раз в работу над моим кейсом. И в один из вечеров просто приехал в шелтер, где мы жили, Дэвид, Аскольд с аппаратурой, и перепугали всех там живущих. Наверное, 2 дня мы обсуждали с Дэвидом как раз момент, что я буду подавать заявление и буду судиться, и тогда Дэвид просто начал настаивать: пожалуйста, я хочу снять все, что будет происходить. Конечно, для меня это был шок, все боялись, потому что каждое слово, каждое движение, каждая видеозапись могла скомпрометировать кого-то или попасть кому-то в руки, кто мог причинить нам вред. Все боялись, конечно. И когда Дэвид объяснил ситуацию, что он хочет зафиксировать каждый мой шаг для того, чтобы, если что-то случилось, было видеодоказательство, тогда я согласился, потому что действительно было очень страшно. А с этого и начались съемки, практически 2 лет моей жизни.
My apologies for the noise. My mom is getting her hair ready. She has a birthday in 2 days. So she's getting ready. Well, in the middle of 2017, I made a decision that I would file a complaint within the police and the LGBT network, as well as the Committee Against Torture was helping me with filing these complaints based on what had happened to me. And at some point, we got to the shelter in Moscow, and that's where I met David and Askold, who was filming everything. And so David explained to me what he wanted to do. He wanted to basically document everything. He wanted to film every single step of my life. And I was really concerned about it. I was scared that some of this footage might get leaked, or someone might get it, and this would jeopardize my whole mission of suing the Russian government. And then David told me that, well, this actually is going to be a document. This is going to be a documentation of everything that's going to happen to me. And this is actually a very important and a powerful tool to capture every single step of my life. So later, if there needs to be evidence presented, or for history's sake, this is going to be an actual document that will have an important purpose. And I said yes, because I thought this was really important. And he really convinced me that this had to be done. And for the next 2 years, he was filming me every single step of my life.
Да, на самом деле еще эти страхи усиливались тем, что там была моя семья, и было особо страшно, что с ними может что-то приключиться из-за этих съемок, поэтому была особо большая тревога. Но Дэвид сумел это все воплотить в прекрасную семейную историю, в историю любви. Это очень приятно. Спасибо, Дэвид.
And I just want to add that this was especially scary for me because of my family and because of the fact that my family might get hurt in the middle of making this film. But David reassured me that everything is going to be safe and everyone's going to be safe. And I trusted him, and I saw that he could do that really. In the end, he turned it into a family story. He turned it into a love story. And I really just want to say thank you to him for that.
I love you, David.
David, I'd love if you would, well, here's the follow-up I'd like to ask you in relation to what Maxim was just sharing. I'm honing in on this idea or this question of documentation, of not just representation, but documentation. And I think about that as I think about the work you do, the work you've done. So if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you to just reflect on that very specific aspect. It's really fundamental aspect in my view of your work, which is documentation. So what does that word and that idea and that concept mean to you as an artist and as a creator?
Well, I come to filmmaking through journalism, and I'm trained as an investigative reporter. Spent many years, documenting and finding facts that are hidden and revealing them, and that's the way I've always. That's what's always motivated me in my work, is this idea of gathering the evidence. And in this historical event, maybe more than any other I've worked on, that evidence had been hidden and had been kept from us. And as we know now, we're entering the 4th year of this horror in Chechnya, ongoing still. They are still denying that it's happening, and they are still, despite the formal allegations that Maxim bravely brought, making him the first person to come out from the shadows to bring criminal charges against the government employees that did this to him in Chechnya. They're still denying that it's happening. They're still denying that there's evidence. And that's what I wanted to do, is to compile that evidence in a way that made it so that their denial was ridiculous on its face, and offensive in the extreme. And that I think that is certainly the first mission of this film, is to lay this out in a way that's undeniable and that forces people into action. We kept saying, this is one of the words that we put words up on our storyboard that motivated us in telling our story, and one of them was to implicate the audience, to implicate the viewers of this story in the knowledge of this stuff happening, to make witnesses out of the audience, and in that way empower a growing number of people to use their own voices to do something about raising these issues. So I think, in answer to your question, that it comes from my tradition, not as an artist, but as a person who digs for facts that are hidden.
Your artistry is built on that fundamental exploration, right? It grows from that, it seems.
Well, I think it has, and certainly my first film was not about a story that was hidden, but one that was ignored.
Yeah.
And then over the years forgotten. And the same, I think, with The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson, a story that unfolded in plain sight, with tens and thousands of witnesses, but that had somehow gone missing also. So yeah, to bring those stories forward. And this one was just being more actively kept from us.
Alice and Igor, help me understand, as you were building this film with David and the bigger team, tell me about balancing some of these ideas of not just artistry, but balancing documentation, this question of implication, activism. How did you think about those broad ideas, but how did they impact and influence the work that you were doing, the team that you were building, the live events that you were all capturing and documenting and figuring out how to represent for an audience? Choices?
There's a lot to unpack there, but we were a very small team, and I'm sure you hear this a lot, but everyone wore a lot of hats, and we all became very quickly a really close family. We had like self-imposed protocols, of how we dealt, like even communicated amongst ourselves and everything. We'd have like a daily meeting every single day in our production office. We never had our phones or our devices in the room with us. We adhered to these kind of protocols throughout the every step of the film. So if a funder came in, we would take their phone off them and show them a clip of the film in this bunker that we set up. So in a way, we kind of went into this sort of in like a little hibernated capsule, just a very small team, and we had to constantly stay in communication with all of the subjects, even when some of them left Russia. We had to maintain contact, partly for security, because I don't know if we're going to get into it in this panel, but we disguised the faces of many of the people, all of the people who were escaping. So we had to stay in contact with them, A, to just make sure that they were okay, but B, so that we could come back to them to show them and get their sign off on how we were presenting them to keep them safe. And so Igor was really the linchpin for that. He was the main person who took on all of that, like constant communications, keeping track of everybody, which was a lot. And so and then the activism itself took on many different forms, right? So David and Olga at the beginning of our filming were very much, we were filming, David and Oscar, our Russian producer, who's also our cinematographer, were filming like the transitions from the shelter out. But at some point, it became apparent that we really needed to have something that showed David doing the work. And so that was something that we had to sort of collaborate with David on, to find a way to do something that was safe or safer and that wasn't going to interfere with their work. And that led to the Anya extraction scene, which was really a culmination of lots of moving parts and sleepless nights for everybody involved, but we got there in the end. So I don't know, Igor, if you have more to add to that. I've kind of rambled a bit. You can cut me down.
I just wanted to add that the anti-gay purge story was first broke on April 1st by this independent newspaper in Russia called Novaya Gazeta, who's had already a few of their reporters murdered for the stories that they've been reporting on, including Anna Politkovskaya, who was extensively reporting on Chechnya and the wars there. And so sort of when we started working on this, I think we knew that we were safer because we were operating out of New York City, but there was still a sense of danger because we had people on the ground working with us, and we were in constant communication with the subject of the film and the refugees, people who are fleeing. So there was this sense of danger, and I think that sort of shaped the way we worked. Like Alice said, it was really like a closed capsule. It was just us. We never talked to anyone about this film, and whenever people asked us what we were working on, we said, we can't tell you right now, but hopefully at some point we will be able to. And that continued for a few years. And especially in the beginning, there was a bit of a sense of danger. Even when I was going to sleep alone by myself in an empty apartment, right across the fire escape, I was thinking, well, what if someone's just gonna come down from the roof and open my window? And because of this sense of danger, I think there was so much energy and work that we put into creating these protocols and actually following through them. Many protocols for every single step of the way. We had, we knew what to do. We knew what the plan A, plan B, and plan C were. And that also, closely collaborating with the activists sort of also shaped the way we worked, and informed us of, what the best practices are. Because, there's no, at least back then, there was no like a one book that would tell us, okay, if you're working on this sort of film, you have to do this and this and this. No, we sort of had to create our own protocols and pave the way hopefully for future filmmakers that could use this protocols or use the information that we gathered so they can safely work on the future films. Because there were a lot of people that helped us, but I think a lot of it was just research and coming up with new strategies.
Yeah, you all are really writing that handbook, right? Thank you, and for the filmmakers who are watching and listening to this conversation, that's another part of the history and legacy of this specific film. We're nearly out of time, and I want to ask Maxim one more question. And you mentioned earlier, Maxim, about you're awaiting some information or a verdict from international court. Help us understand, for folks who are listening, and again, we're recording this in early February, so if someone listens to this months in advance, maybe things are different, but help us understand what we're waiting for, so that as we're going out into the world, so I'm asking you the question about sort of what's happening right now, and then I'll end by asking the whole group, just to help maybe reflect and share on sort of what people, as we go back to impact, what people can do, people that are just watching this film for the first time and want to continue to connect around these issues, and be activists and advocates in this work alongside you and following in your lead, what they can do. So first question to Maxim about sort of what's happening now, what are we waiting for, and then to the team, what can the audience do?
Ну, за этот год я знаю только, что была подана жалоба все-таки, она была принята, и долгое время ждали ответ от России, что Россия скажет на жалобу, поданную в ЕСПЧ. Ответ был очень долгим. К марту было потребовано принять, чтобы Россия приняла решение какое-то, да, и написала свое встречный ответ. Но это все затянулось из-за пандемии, и все-таки благодаря фильму очень многие вещи были сработаны, они сделаны, они не остались как бы в стороне. То есть жалоба была получена, юристы рассмотрели ее. Насколько я знаю, что там были прям детские какие-то ответы, что ли, от России, не знаю, претензии или возмущения, что-то такое. В общем, ответ не устроил никого, грубо говоря. Долгое разбирательство юристов над, как это сказать правильно, Короче, все юристы сформулировали свое решение и тоже подали в ЕСПЧ. И уже в октябре, вроде бы в октябре этого года, все решение было перенесено уже как бы на начало этого года. То есть сейчас пока все опять же на рассмотрении. Я надеюсь, что мы ждем уже финального ответа от ЕСПЧ, когда все наконец-то закончится. Но одно могу точно сказать, что преступники так, в принципе, не обнаружены, но и наказывать их, вероятнее всего, Российская Федерация не собирается, наверное, так. То есть доказать ничего мы не смогли толком.
So after the film came out, my case was accepted by the European Court of Human Rights, and they were waiting for Russia to respond, to draft an opinion about what was happening. And Russia was taking a long time to respond. Plus, the pandemic didn't help. It delayed their response for later. And I think because of the film, it created some sort of pressure on Russia to respond quickly. And it actually helped. So when we received the response and my attorneys received the response, it was really childish. Russia didn't give any specific details or arguments about what actually happened in Chechnya and who's responsible. And so when my attorneys looked at Russia's response, it looked very childish. And I didn't have any arguments or specific facts about what was going on in Chechnya in 2017. And so then my attorneys drafted a response based on Russia's response, and we submitted all of that to the European Court of Human Rights. We were supposed to hear back from them, from the court, in October 2020, but because of the global pandemic, everything is being delayed all the time. So right now, we're looking to hear from them early 2021. So in the next few months, we're supposed to hear a verdict from them. Myself and my attorneys, we don't think that Russia is going to do any specific action of persecuting people who are responsible for the crimes in Chechnya, unfortunately. But we're still hoping for the best. And any international pressure is good.
Я как раз хотел еще, знаешь, добавить вот какую вещь. Все осложняется, ну, то есть постоянно в деле есть какие-то осложнения, проблемы, что-то недосказанности какие-то. В общем, что могу сказать по моему кейсу? То есть любая жалоба, любой процесс, он всегда затрагивает какие-то такие вещи, когда ты не можешь доказать. И, в принципе, чтобы тебе что-то доказать, ты должен это делать сам. В этом большая проблема. Еще большая проблема сложилась в том, что на протяжении всех этих 3 лет пришлось много скрываться. Если я проходил какие-то обследования, походы к врачу, то есть когда там жуткое состояние было, это все приходилось делать через фейковых врачей, не знаю, левых, то есть не документировать. Если это документировать, то под чьё-то другое имя, то есть поход к врачу как минимум. И сейчас ЕСПЧ потребовала, например, собрать какие-то данные за последние 2-3 года о моем здоровье, о течении там, моего здоровья, да, что в такой-то момент мне было плохо, там нервный срыв или еще что-то, но фиксированных данных нет, и это очень сильно осложняет. И как раз российской стороне это на руку, потому что я доказать не могу своего состояния эмоционального и физического. Поэтому очень большая сейчас была проблема в том, чтобы снова доказать как раз тот факт, что причиненный мне вред понес последствия в течение моей жизни, дальнейшей. Но это мы пока доказываем с большим трудом, потому что документального подтверждения нет из-за того, что приходилось обеспечивать себя максимальной безопасностью и скрытностью. Окей, переводи.
One more thing I would like to add is that there are always challenges and complications whenever someone files a court any sort of court case, especially within the European Court of Human Rights. So with my complaint, the burden to prove what had happened to me and to provide evidence was on me. I had to have documented evidence of my health, what had happened to me back then, and how the events, the torture that happened to me is impacting my health right now. And because we've been hiding for the past few years, we were always very cautious and careful whenever we would go to a doctor or anywhere in public, really. So we don't really have the specific evidence and proof that, from the doctors that my health it has been impacted by what had happened to me before. And so right now it's Russia, is celebrating because we don't really have a hard evidence of what had happened, but we were scared back in Russia, and we're still sort of concerned even when we're not there anymore, because there's always a danger to my life and my family's life. That's why we've been hiding all these years, and that's why it's been so difficult to actually provide a specific evidence to the European Court of Human Rights.
As we wrap up, the last question is about impact and how the audience can connect with, engage with, and carry the work of this film forward with you.
Sure. I don't think we'll all have a little round up on that, but we have made it very easy for you. We have a website, welcometochechnya.com/take action, which lists all of our goals for our impact. And you can donate to the LGBT Network or the Moscow Community Center for LGBTQ+ initiatives, which is Olga and the organizations that Olga and David represent in the film. That you can also donate directly to Maxim and his family to help with his court case. So that's one thing. I will just say that, evacuation is ongoing. It's extremely difficult with the pandemic because, of course, all the borders are closed, so it doesn't get easier. But the activists are still very much in touch with people who need to get out and are helping them in other ways, even though if they can't physically move them at this moment in time. So there's a greater need than ever for support for that work. And we also, our other goal is to amplify the international outcry, which David spoke about briefly, with keeping our leaders and our lawmakers not letting up and keeping this in the forefront of their minds and their discussions. And bearing witness in the film to the atrocities that are happening is making it an undeniable. It's making the undeniability impossible, because we have the evidence that shows, and people are speaking about it in Parliament, in the UN, and they're citing the film, which is something we never thought we would be able to do. So that's huge. And understanding the global context is something that we set out to kind of educate people about, but we've kind of gone further than that with this film by actually reaching the audiences in other countries that need to see the film. Hungary, Poland, Russia. The film's actually out in Russia, which is something we thought we would never achieve, but BBC News Russian picked the film up and put it out for free to everybody who lives in Russia, including Chechnya. So they have access to it, and that really sums up like the prime goals of the impact campaign. But I'm sure David and Igor can talk about more things that have been impactful, or maybe not.
Well, you really captured it, Alice, and thank you for that. And so did Maxim when he said that the film has been helpful for bringing pressure on for his case, and that certainly was a goal of ours. And we're grateful that the film has been able to be useful to the people like Maxim and David and Olga and the activists on the ground who needed something to help them advance their cause. And if we can continue doing that, and I know you mentioned in passing that we're beginning an initiative with the United Nations to begin an investigation now, a UN-wide investigation, independent investigation into the crimes in Chechnya, and the film will be party to that investigation. And that's what we, when we ask people to support a film like this, when we ask people to participate in a film like this, to agree to take on the risks of appearing in front of the lens in a film like this, we hope that it will make things better and easier and have a positive impact on social justice. And it seems, even despite the pandemic, that this film is having that kind of traction so far.
I'll invite our audience who are watching this conversation today or who are listening to our podcast of this conversation to take the simple step of sharing it with 1, 2, 3 other people in your life, on social media. It has a huge impact, and the film is in our country, in the US, is readily available. It was easy for me to go onto HBO Max and rewatch it this week. So it is available. Please do. And if you're in other parts of the world, as Igor mentioned, even in Russia, available. The film is available for free. So just the least we could do, right, is just to share the experience of watching it and the invitation to watch it with people in our own communities, our own networks. I want to thank each of the people in this conversation: Maxim, David, Alice, Igor. Thank you so much for just for taking the time to talk with us about this film and to share the work that you've been doing, the work you've done, the work you continue to do. It's meaningful for us to have the opportunity just to sit and have a conversation about it. So I want to thank you for taking the time with us today.
Thank you, Eugene.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everybody.